Good evening. It is Tuesday, April the 17th, about 9:45 p.m. This is Shay Gibson with WeatherFlow bringing you a Chucktown wind report. We'll talk about the winds for tomorrow through Friday and then do a preliminary report for the Fort2Battery winds. So it looks like there's going to be a northeast wedge developing along the eastern seaboard. It's just a matter of how strong it's going to get by the time the weekend gets here. And we'll get into those details in just a moment. For right now, let's go ahead and take a look at the area. Things are fairly quiet. We have a little bit of a moderate pulse at Isle of Palms, west-southwest, bleeding off of that westerly element we had for most of the day today, 62.7 degrees. Folly Beach had the highest winds today at with a gust right around 26 knots between 5 and 6 o'clock p.m. And so we saw quite a bit of a jump there, but mainly the main factor today has been this westerly flow, and that's going to be from this Gulf of Mexico high pressure right here that you see in the picture, sort of giving this westerly zonal flow across the area, and that was really working the background winds for most of the day until we got the southwesterly sort of element trying to nudge on shore from those sea breezes today. I did call it to sort of come up to moderate. Folly Beach was the only one that saw it. Anywhere north of the harbor did not see that. But this high will continue to slide off to the east. We also have a trough, an area of troughing right here coming together. This is going to develop into our next cold front as this low sweeps up towards the Great Lakes behind this one exiting off to the east. It looks like kind of a mess right now, but we do have a cold front aligned to sort of approach the area on Thursday. But that means tomorrow our southerly winds are going to come up ahead of that cold front. It looks like we may see a little bit of that nocturnal jetting tonight as winds are continuing to hold into these moderate values tonight. We may even see this hold until about 4 or 5 a.m. when they bleed out. We may see that westerly turn for the land breezes and then slowly come back up again tomorrow, in which case I'm looking for drier air tomorrow. Dew points are going to be a lot lower, so if we get our air temperatures to stay below 80, somewhere in the mid to upper 70s, the ambient air temperatures inland, we may have a good shot at seeing these sea breezes come up tomorrow. In fact, the models, if we go ahead and run all the models, this is iKitesurf I'm using right here. We see there's a lot of agreement with a west-southwest sort of zonal flow still mixing in from that Gulf of Mexico high pressure to the south. I think it's going to push further east and allow that sea breeze to really kind of turn more south-southwest. So I'm more in agreement with the NAM 3 kilometer right here in these afternoon hours turning south-southwest with the sea breeze. The speeds, right now the models are in some agreement for mid-teens. The Wolf Wharf 2 kilometer model goes all the way up to 20 knots starting around 2 to 3 p.m. That might be overshooting it just a little bit. It tends to get a little bit exaggerated and be a little bit overzealous as a model, but you never know. We could hit that number. I think along the immediate beaches we're still looking at some marine layering effects, which is why I call for drier air in general, and lower dew points would help the sea breeze settle to the surface along the beaches. If we get into the 80s, we may have a little bit of a problem with that, and as always we usually see these coastal breaks in these areas just downwind of these land masses really firing off across the inner harbor. So we could see that again tomorrow. I mean, usually that's ahead of a storm front where we'd see the winds really jack up, but I think that we'll see that little effect tomorrow by a few knots higher inside the harbor and inside the coastal breaks and inland than we will the coastline. So the final call for tomorrow is going to be, I think I'd put 13 to 17 knots at around 3 o'clock p.m. and then maybe gusting to maybe getting 14 to 18, pushing 20 knots in gusts. But we could get up a little bit higher than that if everything works just right. In fact, the sounding from tonight, go ahead and take a quick look at our weather balloon sounding from this evening, and all the winds aloft in the mid and upper levels are all westerly in nature, so that's good for the sea breeze circulation. So it looks like the pieces to the puzzle are there for a pretty decent circulation. Now as we get into Thursday, we do have that cold front approach, and we see the winds west-southwest ahead of the front and then turning as we get later in the afternoon down from the north, and this is all based on the fact of a cold front passing through, which would shift the winds. And if we look at all the models, we'll see how much more agreement we have for that on Thursday. So winds could be getting kind of shifted. We may have a nice little breeze out ahead of that front with some low-level jetting, but the dew points come up. Everything sort of starts to wind down along the beaches and more so inside the coastal breaks. But then you see that turn to the north a little bit later to the west-northwest around 4 or 5 o'clock p.m. So it shifts from a side shore west-southwest to west. So Thursday is kind of a wild card right now. I'm not really sure what's going to happen. But as we go into Friday, we start to see winds coming out of the north-northeast and northeast. And this is all due to high pressure building over the Great Lakes. So here's the GFS model I get from Tropical Tidbits. Levi Cowan, a good friend of mine there. So if you ever need a good modeling website, you can go here. And if we go forward into time, this is as we get into tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon. Here comes the low, that low traveling to the east across the mid-Atlantic, just north of the mid-Atlantic. And here's the high pressure setting up over the Great Lakes. This is the one that I'm going to be watching very closely for this weekend. As we get into Friday, we're going to see a shot of these northeast winds coming down, an initial burst of these winds as the northeast wedge sets up for a prolonged period. Now, the models do back it off, or the GFS in particular backs this off in strength along the southeast coast as we get into Friday afternoon and into Friday night. And we have to really watch a couple of different things. We have to watch for a separate lobe of high pressure to develop along the coast or just lee side of the Appalachians over here, which would weaken the overall flow. And this may hold into Saturday, but right now the models are, the GFS in particular, is not being very confident on its call for Saturday. In fact, it has it mostly east on Saturday. As we run the model this far into Saturday morning, we see that it may be trying to develop a separate lobe right here, which would make the winds full east and a lot weaker. However, if this dome holds up here and we don't get any short waving along the coast or any little areas of troughing, we could get a full-on northeast wedge building down. And what we know about Charleston area is that we get northeast winds that sort of work with the sea breeze, the warmer land masses, and it sort of picks up speed just along the beaches and just inside the harbor, and you get a little bit of sea breeze effect, just enough to be able to have a pretty decent race for Saturday. If we take a quick peek at the GFS for the local winds, here's Friday morning, and here's that northeast wedge set up when we start Friday morning. A lot of that gradient is offshore, but it sure is there, and we can assume that they may build along the beaches as well starting Friday afternoon. With that east-northeast sea breeze oscillation coupling, we get the winds up a little stronger. But the model does back down on that, and it does start to show a little bit of kinking in the isobars, a little bit of maybe some trough activity, which this would be called short waving. If we have this sort of upper flow, which is expected to be here Friday, when you have that with the surface flow this way, and you have winds at 18 to 36,000 feet coming down from the west-northwest over the top of that, sometimes you can get a little bit of a circulation with any troughing, especially when you get cool air over the warmer Gulf Stream. You get moisture pickup, you get a little bit of convective activity, and then you get this opposing wind aloft, and sometimes you get a little bit of a rotation. And so GFS is picking up on that a little bit. We're really going to have to watch for that as we get into Friday and Saturday. And as we get into the GFS run for Saturday, it picks it up again, brings the gradient up. So it's really just a kind of a tough call. The human element in me wants to go with a pretty moderate flow building on Saturday and becoming even stronger on Sunday. And in fact, if we go into Monday, we see the gradient tightening even further with high pressure as low pressure starts to come together in the across the northern Gulf states. So that'll be a whole other topic for next week. We're getting really too far out in the models. This is extremely far out. But the main thing here is just kind of keeping in mind that the winds are going to look good for sea breezing tomorrow from the south, sort of iffy on Thursday, maybe a shift. Friday, we start to see that northeast wedge work in. If we can get it to hold through Saturday, that'll fire off the event pretty well. Here's the Fort2Battery page, and the registration is still open. I got word today that they're going to extend the registration until Friday. Or until further notice. So yesterday was going to be the final date, but they went ahead and extended it. So you can go ahead and enter now. Saturday is supposedly the race date, but if it needs to be held till Sunday, Sunday does look a little bit better in the wind profile for now, but we still need to keep in mind that Saturday could be a good day. Sea surface temperatures, our shelf waters are starting to fill in a little bit to the mid-60s. For us in Charleston, we're still near 65. We're right at, I believe we're at 64 degrees right here. Water temperature, that's from the French Quarter. That's the main official water gauge meter. If we look at our air temperatures going into the weekend, we are going to get a little bit of a cool down. We're going to warm up over the next couple of days with the southerly flow, but as we get into the weekend with that northeast wedge, that's always means cooler air, so it also brings that cooler wedge down over the cooler shelf waters, and we start getting into the upper 60s again, and then maybe upper 40s to low 50s overnight for low temperatures. If we take a look at cloud cover, looks like we're going to be high and dry for Saturday morning. Looks like clouds start to build as cool air dams up over the southeast region. We get into Sunday, and then Sunday is pretty much a whiteout with clouds overhead. We're not expecting very much rain on Sunday. In fact, we're not expecting any rain at all until Monday early next week. Looks like we could get a pretty a rainy period for a few days there. So that's the cloud cover. But once again, Fort2Battery Race this weekend. If you haven't registered, go ahead and register. It looks like we're going to have some rideable conditions out there. So until next time, I'll probably go over to Force Kite and Wake tomorrow and do a little interview with Stan, see what he says, or see what we're going to talk about for the race coming up and what the forecast needs to call for. I'll have a little bit better of an idea tomorrow. And until then, until next time I come on, you guys have a good night and thanks for watching. Take care.